evening, everyone. My name is Karen Swinger and want to welcome you to the very first episode of Honor at Work. My amazing co-host, Donna Brumfield, Dr. Don. Dr. Don is our resident therapist. And one other thing, too, you can visit the show notes because links to the bios for all of our speakers tonight will be in the show notes. Dr. Don is going to be our resident therapist. She has probably 20 degrees. So what she says, right? So Dr. Don, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing well. I'm really excited to be here and ready to get to work, as they say.
Good, absolutely. I know that you are still at work, so we're going to make this quick. Honor at Work is about doing things practically in 20 minutes. We also have with us, this is my first time meeting Michelle. Her name is M. Michelle Day. And I'm not going to read her bio, but I did read the very first line, and I didn't feel like I needed to go any further. The very first line says, a minister, attorney, and certified mediator. So let's go ahead and get started, ladies. The format for Honor at Work, since this is the first one, it is one topic, one question, and 3 different perspectives. So today our topic is about compensation. We're starting with money. We had several questions that came in about money. And our question is from a listener in Tennessee. And the way we work, we read the question, we get the perspective, and then we move on. This is not, let me put this disclaimer in as well, not legal advice. If you need an attorney, go find you one and hire one, okay? So as stepping stones, as a way to kind of get started. All right, one of my coworkers contracted COVID, wouldn't wear a mask, and ended up taking a month or so off from work. My manager divided his work out to the rest of the team, 3 of us, to cover in his absence. He has been back at work for about 6 weeks now and has taken back the duties that were given to my other coworkers. However, my manager is still asking for me to keep the work until he settles back in. It's been about 6 weeks. I've tried to talk to my manager about it a couple of times, but she keeps pushing me off. I don't really want to go to HR because I think that will cause more trouble. I need my job, but I don't want my coworkers' work, especially since I'm the only one left doing it. I feel like I am being taken advantage of, and that makes me angry. So Dr. Don, from a mental health perspective, let's start from there because we know anger can go a lot of different ways in the workplace today. So what would you say?
Well, that's a lot. First, I do want to also put my own disclaimer out there. I am a therapist, but I'm not you all, the listeners' therapist. So any thought that I share related to this topic is my own Dr. Dawn's opinion, and it's not intended to label any one person. Now, having said that, workplace money, bullying, especially when it comes to our money and our attitude, can really impact our mental health perspective. It can impact us in ways like dreading work and wanting to stay home, increased risk for depression and anxiety, suicidal thoughts, low self-esteem, self-doubt. Your attitude is impacted because your desire to come to work or your willingness to give 100% on the job is attached always to how you're treated by your supervisors as well as your coworkers, not just your supervisors. Listen, we all want to feel valued. At least I do. Don't know about you. We want to feel like we are contributing, that what we have to say matters. We start to question our own value, though, when we feel like someone's bullying or demeaning us. We wonder even if our bullying is just in our imagination. So our attitude is directly linked to how we are treated and how we feel in the workplace. If you are encountering any of this or the kind of experience of what our listener or our reader just had, things could come up like you might be more inclined to take days off, even if you don't have them to spare. That impacts your money, honey. You might be less productive in your goals or specific tasks that are directed from management, which also impacts your reviews and how your merit is measured, which impacts your money, honey. I don't know about you, but I need all of my coins. So I say that to say the takeaway from this is The bullying is not your fault. How you are impacted by the people you work with is not on you. My thought as a mental health clinician is always take care of you first. You are important, you are worth it, and that's real talk.
Absolutely, absolutely. Your perspective is valid to you, and it's normal for you to feel that way. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Donna, from a career coach lens, how can you tell if you're being sensitive to matters like this? Because when you impact, your money's impacted, then you start to feel some type of way. So if you're being sensitive about it, or if it's bullying or harassment, is there a way to start to dissect, those out?
Well, the point that I would make, and I like what Dr. Dawn said about the money, honey, when it starts impacting your job performance, that's where you really need to question what's going on. But from a career coach perspective, it's more about looking out for what's best for you. And I think Dawn addressed that also. How is this addressed? How is this making me feel about myself? How is it changing how I'm feeling about work and what's going on at work? And so I always start with the person first, assess what's going on. And the best way that I would say is to have a person that you can talk to, have a friend that you can talk to, and just kind of share, what's going on. And that does two things. First, it gets off of your mind and off of your heart what you're feeling, and then to have someone else hear and respond back to you what they see, whether it's being overly sensitive. Sometimes we are overly sensitive, but it could be something deeper, and having someone neutral that may not know anything about your job, may not know anything about your company, but they are listening to your heart, and they could help, steer you in the right way. And then if that doesn't help, then that's where the professional, going to HR and that kind of thing would come into play.
Absolutely. So basically, we do have to start with ourselves to take that introspection to see where we are, take note of where we are. And then if we do decide, not even if we do decide, if going to HR, if you said, Donna, after we take the introspection, each state has different labor laws, and I don't even know if everything falls under any labor laws. And so, Michelle, is it true that each state has different labor laws? And if so, can you just tell us just a little bit about the labor laws here in Illinois, since this is where we are?
Well, yes, each state does have varying labor laws. Some of them track the federal law, and some of them are different than the federal law. But federal law generally takes precedent. For example, a state may not have its own discrimination laws, but you can't violate the Civil Rights Act, the Federal Civil Rights Act. So a number of questions come into play with this particular situation, because there's so many different levels at which it needs to be analyzed. And so I'll just name some of them. Some of them are whether or not the particular company has personnel rules in place that might pertain to this situation. Also, whether or not this is a union environment and this is a union employee who's subject to a union contract, which would determine what kind of duties, et cetera, can be assigned. Keeping in mind that there's always that catch-all of other duties as assigned. But that brings me to another level of analyzation. All laws, rules, etc., are looked at or reviewed through a lens of whether or not they're reasonably applied. Okay, so I'll get back to that in just a second. But then on the continuing with the different ways in which it needs to be analyzed, then you're looking at the facts of whether or not a discrimination law has been violated. For instance, this employee may be the only member of a minority, and those who are not continuing to do this other employee's work may be a member of a different race, sex, age, sexual orientation, or gender, etc. So you would have to know more facts to understand whether or not a law has been broken, or they are in fact being bullied. But I want to go back to the question of reasonableness, where an employer has to balance a person's need for a reasonable accommodation because of an illness against the workload or the needs of the workplace. Any court is going to look at whether or not their actions are reasonable. And what we know about COVID right now is that there is a serious recovery period for some people. So it would boil down to whether or not 6 weeks is enough time for that person to recover. It would boil down to whether or not the duties that remain with this person are different from the duties that were given back to the person. So there's a whole lot of things to be weighed. And I love what Ms. Brumfield and Dr. Brumfield had to say with respect to, let's start with yourself first and examine whether or not there's resentment there because this person didn't wear a mask, or resentment because of the work still being placed in your lap. You start with yourself first, then start with those levels that I spoke of in terms of thinking about whether or not any of this applies. But there is one other law in the state of Illinois, and that is the Personnel Records Act. And one of the things that says is that you can often add to your employee file. You can see your employee file. And I always like to err on the side of not looking like the most negative person on earth. But if in fact you feel like you are doing an unreasonable or a heavy load or extra load of work, you can always choose to add to your personnel file in the most positive way possible. I thank you for this opportunity to do this extra work because it has enhanced my value to the company in these ways. And I look forward to that taking part or being part of my performance review in the future. So there are all kind of ways to beat the system. I hate to say beat the system, but there are all kind of ways of addressing this. But it all starts with that evaluation, that analysis of all of those levels.
Absolutely. And that is amazing advice. I have never heard that advice. So I appreciate that advice. I'm sure our listeners will as well.
Yes, I just want to say you have to be very careful what you put in your file. If you put a letter of complaint, you will always wind up looking like the complaining employee because people don't have the facts. They just have that long drawn out letter of many complaints that you have put in your file.
Absolutely. And that brings it all the way back full circle, and all the more reason to mentally be on the right plane so that you can see how to go through and analyze those levels and then apply it appropriately and effectively, actually. Wow, that has been amazing. But this has been an amazing, amazing first episode. I want to thank all of our hosts today, all of our speakers. Michelle, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it. Dr. Donna, thank you so much. And Dr. Don, as always, thank you as well. To our listeners, thank you so much for joining us to our very first episode of Honor at Work. We hope that you join us again next Wednesday at 6 p.m. for another amazing questions. Thank you so much. Have a good night. Bye-bye. Thank you, ladies.